achieved.
Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. As always, I am your host, Scott Johnson, and on this episode of the show, we're taking a look at the upcoming UFC 178 pay-per-view, which will take place on September 27th, and will feature a number of highly anticipated matches, including the Demetrious Johnson Chris Cariaso flyweight title fight in the main event, the UFC debut of Eddie Alvarez taking on Donald Cerrone, Dustin Poirier facing Conor McGregor, the return of Dominick Cruz, the return of Zingano. There's a myriad of fights on this card that are worth getting excited for. I'm coming off an okay UFC Fight Night 52. I went 7-5 overall, losing the final fight. I did okay early on. I struggled a little bit in the middle. I did have a parlay that won just over $600, which is pretty solid. Nonetheless, I'll be posting my UFC 178 bet packs ASAP. Again, major life event on the horizon. The birth of my second child is coming up very quickly, so I will do the best I possibly can. In the event I am unable to post the bet packs, because more important things come along and you've already purchased, I certainly will refund your money. There are 2 more events after this one that are on the following weekend that I'd love to try and post picks for. If I can, I will. Obviously, if other things take place first, I certainly will not have time to do that. And again, you'll have to check out my website for the panel predictions, as those guys will do their best to make up for my stead. Nonetheless, we have 5 fantastic fights, so let's get to the very first one. And before we break into our predictions, I apologize for my voice. It's a little bit late here, and I'm a little bit under the weather, the headache, so I just feel a little bit off, but I'll do my best to keep things lively. Our opening fight of the night takes place in the UFC's Women's Bantamweight Champion. Is number 1 ranked Cat Alpha Zingano, with a record of 8 wins and no losses, takes on number 8th ranked Amanda the Lioness Nunez, with a record of 9-3. Now, both fighters returning from long layoffs. Cat missed 17 months overall, Nunez missed 10. Kat's also coming back from knee surgery and the unfortunate suicide of her husband, and you have to really question what her mental state is coming into this matchup. How will she be affected? Will she be affected? You never know. Some fighters will use their athletic endeavors to distract them from their real life situations or their home life situations, so this could be a great release for her. We'll have to wait and see. Nunez an experience advantage of 12 fights to 8 compared to Zingano, but where that's fairly close. But you consider that she's fought twice in the UFC, twice in Strikeforce, and twice in Invicta, compared to Cat, who's only fought once in the once in the UFC and once in Invicta. So certainly an advantage for Nunez there. Nunez has serious power. 8 of her 9 wins have come by knockout, including knocking out Julia Budd with a one-punch knockout back in Strikeforce, which was very impressive. She's a Muay Thai-based striker, decent leg kicks, and has a big overhand right, which if she lands can give a lot of trouble. One of the true knockout artists in the women's division. For Zingano, 4 stoppages overall, including her vicious knockout of Miesha Tate. She does her best work in close range. She lands some excruciatingly hard elbows and almost hard to watch brutal knee strikes on Tate in that matchup. Against Nunes, she'll need to close the distance. She does not want to be at range. As had big knees in close, good work in the clinch. Had a lot of success against Raquel Pennington in the clinch as well in her lone Invicta appearance, which was pretty darn impressive. When she fought Tate early on, though, she had her hands down. She was getting cracked during a number of exchanges, both at range and along the wall, at least early on with Miesha Tate. That's something she cannot afford to do, and she can't afford to get off to a slow start against Nunez, because if she gets hit with one of her big shots, it might be all she can take. It might be too much for her. She said in that first fight she was feeling her nerves and didn't get into her comfort zone. We'll see if, her second UFC appearance, she feels a little better, or if the layoff continues to affect her. Now, both girls are credited grapplers. Nunez a BJJ brown belt, but she's a 1-1 in fights ended by submission. Her strong suit is her top game ground and pound. She's very strong, and she can generate a lot of power from top position. She has a pretty good single leg takedown. Likes to try and advance her top position as soon as possible and cut through the guard. Against both Sheila Gaff and Jermaine Dirondami, she mounted them almost immediately. She also has a nice body lock trip takedown, which can be very effective. She's improved her wrestling, and she can land some huge elbows and strikes from top position. That's how she brought about the stoppages in both those matchups. For Zingano, though, she's a 4-time All-American wrestler, 1-time National Collegiate Champion, and a purple belt in BJJ. She has 3 submission wins, including her Invicta win over Pennington. In her fight against Miesha Tate, she was taken down several times, because Tate's a pretty strong wrestler in her own right. She was mounted, almost armbarred and leg locked, but showed pretty solid submission defense. She has incredibly dangerous ground and pound from top position with those elbows that she was able to land on Tate and really bust her up. But Miesha was bowling her into the cage, and that's something Nunes with her size may look to implicate as well. I really didn't, but he saw Zingano turn things around once she wore Tate down. She shot for a nice low single and took Misha down and put her on her backer in the third round. One thing to keep in mind, though, in rounds 1 and 2, when Tate was very aggressive, Kat was backing up on the defensive, not nearly as effective. For Tate, though, once she slowed down in the third round, Kat took control, and that's one thing to keep in mind here. If Nunes is aggressive, will she be able to keep Kat backing up? Overall, though, Nunes has struggled against very good grapplers, against Alexis Davis, against Sarah DeLelio, who took her down every time she came forward, and Nunes had almost nothing off her back. She was also taken down by Sheila Gaff fairly early on and almost got her back taken. The mental issues in the break for Zingano were significant concerns, but I think she'll have a massive grappling advantage, and it shows up here. She'll wear out Nunes, who's known for having some cardio issues, and my prediction is Kat Zingano to defeat Amanda Nunes by TKO. In the UFC's middleweight division, number 6 ranked Tim Kennedy, 18-4-0, battles fellow former Strikeforce competitor, number 10 ranked the Soldier of God, Yoel Romero, with a record of 8 wins and just a single defeat. The grappling game could decide this matchup, but let's address the striking aspect of it first. Romero has developed a very unique but incredibly dangerous striking game. He changes speeds effectively. He starts off very slow and looks almost sluggish sometimes, and then all of a sudden is lightning quick and changes gears and can really put it on his opponent very quickly. The speed and pace he likes to attack and throws different rhythms at opponents are very hard to read, very hard to anticipate, and as a result, very hard to defend against. Averages 3.48 strikes landed per minute versus just 1.89 strikes absorbed. So he's very difficult to hit, and he puts up some pretty high numbers offensively. We saw that flying knee knockout of Clifford Sparks, which is pretty darn impressive. He uses all his weapons very effectively, but sometimes he's too passive. Sometimes he uses a lot of movement and doesn't engage enough, and that can get him, caught. Against Derek Brunson, or before he stopped Brunson, Derek had a lot of success outworking him on the feet and landing more strikes and just being the busier fighter. Cardio for Romero was a question mark, at least earlier in his career. It appears he's got it, at least potentially under control, as he scored late stoppages of Hani Marks and Derek Brunson based on his ability to be the more conditioned fighter. But again, we'll have to wait and see how he fares if he's pushed, because he is a heavily muscled fighter. For Tim Kennedy, not a great striker overall, but he certainly is improving. He tends to leave his chin up a little bit, but he's certainly tightening his defensive work up. He does have 6 wins by knockout, including a pretty impressive one-punch KO of Rafael Natal. But if you go back to that fight, it only lasts just not quite a round. Natal was having a lot of success being the busier fighter. They're landing some strikes on Kennedy and keeping him back up, who has a tendency to wait on his opponent when engaging, letting them first and trying to counter back. But I think what this fight comes down to is the grappling exchanges are going to decide it. Now, Yoel Romero is an Olympic silver medalist in freestyle wrestling. Tim Kennedy is a jiu-jitsu black belt and has shown a very good MMA grappling game overall. Both guys average in the mid 2.5s in takedowns per fight, somewhere in the 30% completion range. So not great numbers, but still very effective with their grappling. We did see Tim Kennedy's coming off a dominant performance against Michael Bisping, where he took him down, I think, 5 times and completely smothered on the mat. A lot of people criticize his performance, but he did what he needed to do to win that fight. He also out-grappled Roger Gracie. He has had trouble in some fights. Trevor Smith was one guy, and Roger Gracie had some success early on, but Kennedy ultimately got the better of them because he was able to just keep working and outwork them. For Romero, he really showcased his wrestling for the first time in his fight win over Brad Tavares in his most recent outing. Tossed him around, landed 7 takedowns overall, and physically, he had the physically superior top control, really outmuscled Tavares and was the better fighter overall. One thing to keep in mind, though, Romero, no submission finishes, so he's more about taking guys down, keeping them off their game, maybe landing some shots and busting them up from top position, but we haven't seen him go for really any submissions. Now, defensively, Romero seems to have some holes despite his high caliber. He struggled with the wrestling of Derek Brunson. He was taken down 3 times. He was mounted in that matchup, and he didn't have a lot of success until Brunson started to slow down late defending the takedowns. Hani Marks actually took him down a couple of times as well, and people were really surprised that. Even if you go back all the way back to his fight in Strikeforce against Rafael Feijoa, it was a light heavyweight, but Feijoa put him on his back as well. I would say, from what I've seen, Tim Kennedy is by far the superior MMA grappler, and he will take Romero down and smother him. And the thing is, that's what I'm looking for him to do. And wrestlers are not very strong off their back. They don't like being there. They're not traditionally not used to that position. That's something I think Romero's going to struggle with. Overall, I think it's going to tax Romero's cardio. It's going to make him more tentative on the feet, and it's going to and less aggressive, and it's going to really take it out of him, especially in the later rounds where he's had success coming back in fights where it was a little bit questionable whether he'd win a decision or not. I like Tim Kennedy's use of position over submission here, but I think he'll wear down and he'll control and wear down Romero, eventually set up something, and my prediction is Tim Kennedy to defeat Yoel Romero by submission. The third main card fight takes place in the UFC's featherweight division. It is an incredibly highly anticipated matchup as the number 5 ranked Dustin the Diamond Poirier, 16-3-0, battles the number 9 ranked, the notorious Conor McGregor, the record of 15-2-0. McGregor getting a massive step up, and Poirier looking to meet him and send him back down the ranks. This is a huge fight for both men, and the winner could get themselves a number 1 contenders bout, or at the right scenarios, possibly a title shot, especially if McGregor wins. He could be fast-tracked to a shot at the title. For McGregor, he's really trying to play down this step up in competition, but this is, in fact, a very big step up in competition. Dustin Poirier is absolutely no slouch. Case in point, he's 8-2 in the UFC. He's fought 10 times already in the UFC. He's 8-2 overall. But he has had big fights before, title shot implications on the line against the Korean Zombie and Cub Swanson, who he took on short notice, but he lost both of those matchups, so he's 0-2 there, and this is a really huge opportunity where he needs to win it, or he'll take another big step back down the ladder. Now, both guys are multifaceted guys with a variety of weapons that they can call upon to win fights. Poirier, excellent combinations, a very nice lead jab, will throw right-left combinations, very strong there, uppercuts, body shots, nice variety of striking. He will stand in the pocket, and is very good at pressuring his opponent and cutting off the cage and forcing them to engage. We saw him drop Eric Koch with a shot on the feet, overwhelm Diego Brandao and Akira Corsani along the cage, and he has 7 wins by knockout, and he's never been stopped either. He also has a very good kicking game. I really like his low kicks. He will go to the body as well, and he has a nice push kick to keep his opponents backed off and keep them from really engaging and pushing forward. Lands 4.45 strikes per minute versus 3.13 strikes absorbed, so he lands a lot. He does get hit a lot as well. He tends to get a little bit too aggressive. We saw that against Akira. He got cracked a couple of times, and actually I think Akira had him hurt early in that matchup, which caught a lot of people off guard. He was also hurt and backed up by Cub Swanson, and he was having a lot of success throwing a lot of variety and techniques at Dustin, who seemed a little bit confused as to how to defend against that. He has had trouble in the past with strong strikers, and as a result, he was forced to change gears and rely solely on his grappling, which he's more than capable of doing. We'll see if that transpires here. Overall, 6 wins by submission. He's a BJJ brown belt, good submission arsenal, really likes that Darce choke against Corsani. He attempted a Peruvian necktie, which didn't work out, but looked pretty darn cool in the process. He was taken down by Diego Brandao, but got up very quickly. His lone submission loss came against the Korean Zombie, where he struggled to find any success with his grappling. Similar situation against Cub Swanson. He couldn't take Cub down with any regularity. He did work into a couple of advantageous positions, but the big question is, can he take Conor McGregor down? I think if he can, that's going to be a massive advantage for him. Now Conor's a BJJ purple belt. He has been submitted twice, with the last one coming in 2010. He's been working with Gunnar Nelson to improve his grappling, and we've really seen him step it up a little bit, at least with his grappling game, especially in his fight with Max Holloway, where he took Max down. He landed some decent shots from top position. He really controlled him, advanced into side control, eventually mounted him. He's very good at guard passing, or at least he was in that fight. Against Diego Brandao, he defended an early takedown against a pretty good grappler in Brandao, showed very strong hips, was able to counter another additional takedown attempt into top position, and survived a couple of submission attempts. The big thing with Conor is yet to face anyone that really has tried to, at least in the UFC, has really tried to take him down and work and pursue that grappling game that I think Dustin Poirier will. The one thing that's very good about McGregor, he's incredibly relaxed. He's a very confident striker, and that on the feet, and that makes it difficult for guys to really get him out of his game and create openings through rushing him. He uses the karate-based stance, which would be very difficult to attack, but he tends to hold his hands a little bit low, which leaves him open, especially with a guy like Poirier, who has pretty good power in his strikes. Conor likes to throw a variety of kicks, a lot of unorthodox strikes. He's very unpredictable, kind of in a similar fashion to what we saw with Cub when he had success keeping Poirier guessing and keeping him off balance. What we see with McGregor as well, he likes to use that right hand as a range finder, keeping it out there, but also jab with it and try and catch opponents coming in. When he fought Max Holloway, he's an incredibly talented and technical striker. He had Max very unsettled, using a lot of volume, a lot of power, and a lot of variety. I think you'll see that a lot out of him here. He was able to see most of what Holloway was throwing at him and limit the impact and avoid. He has excellent distance recognition, which is a big factor in this striking game. Poirier has been hurt before in fights. He gets hit a lot, too much for the guy who hits like McGregor. They've said he hits like a middleweight before. But Conor has to respect him, has to defend the takedowns, can't simply come with his hands down and expect to smash through Poirier in the past. Poirier has derailed some guys like Josh Grisby and Eric Koch, who were expected to be the next big thing, and he took them both out. I think, though, Conor's going to land something big and eventually swarm and pick up the finish. So my prediction is Conor McGregor to defeat Dustin Poirier by TKO. We move up to our co-main event of the evening, and the hits just keep on coming as far as fantastic matchups are concerned. We're in the UFC's lightweight division. It's the number 5 ranked Donald Cowboy Cerrone, 24-6-0 with 1 no contest. Battles number 14th ranked debuting Eddie Alvarez with a record of 25-3-0. And if you're not familiar with Eddie Alvarez, go check out his matchups with Michael Chandler, which I'll talk about in a moment. As I said, Alvarez is making the jump over from Bellator. He is their current lightweight champion. He needs to avoid a similar fate to Hector Lombard, who came over and really stunk up the joint in his opening fight. The question is, octagon jitters, could they impact Eddie Alvarez? He's long wanted to come over to the UFC. He's been really considered a top lightweight for a long time. He's fought some decent competition like Michael Chandler, like Patricky Pitbull, like Shinya Aoki, but for him to prove it, he needs to fight against these top-level competition. This is his opportunity now. He does not want to let that slide. Alvarez coming in of a 10-month layoff. He's only had 3 fights since the start of 2012, so it's not a lot of activity over the last couple of years. A lot of it had to do with the Bellator legal issues. In comparison, Donald Cerrone in the same time frame has fought 9 times, so he's much more active, and that could show up here. Cowboy, a lot of pressure on him as well. He lost Anthony Pettis, lost to Nate Diaz, and lost to Rafael dos Santos, all in big fights that could have led to title shots. He needs a win here. Alvarez overall, 14 wins by knockout, just a single loss. He's an incredibly strong, talented boxer, lots of lateral movement, fakes, likes to paw with that left jab and keep it out there as a rangefinder and a weapon to do damage. He will use it to set up a big right hand or throw the right hand on his own, which can be very effective as well. He has good body punches, changes up levels very well, and then he likes to come upstairs after his opponent starts dropping down to defend those low shots. When he had Michael Chandler in trouble a couple of times against the cage, landing short-range shots that can really do a lot of damage. He will throw a nice body kick. He'll also go to the head, but doesn't throw a ton of kicking volume. When he took out Patricky Pitbull, he landed a very nice head kick for the finish in the first round, and he set it up by landing body shots. And he had Pitbull covering up the midsection and really crouching down, and that left the head shot open, and he landed it. But on the other side of things, Alvarez, he was hurt by Michael Chandler very early in their first fight. Also, at the end of the first round, Pitbull also stunned him as well. So you have to really wonder, he's only been knocked out 1 time, but is his chin a little bit vulnerable? He was struggling with the distance of Chandler. That could have been because he was rocked and he didn't want to engage too quickly. He was coming up short with punches. That's something you cannot afford to do against Donald Cerrone. Now, Cowboy's a bit of a slow starter, and he's far better when he's the aggressor and his opponent isn't able to back him up. And he's been able to avoid that of late. We'll see if he continues that trend. He is incredibly dangerous and excellent technical Muay Thai. Very slick combinations, excellent elbow strikes, but his kicking game and his knee strikes are probably his most effective weapons. Only 4 wins by knockout, but 3 of his last 6 victories have come by knockout, and one of the reasons he only has 4 wins overall is because he tends to hurt guys and then immediately go for the submission, like we saw against Dennis Seaver. As I said, he's stepping. Or sorry, where was I here? As I said, he's a very good kicking game. He will go high with the head kick, which he scored a couple knockouts with. Hard body kicks, sets him up the head kick by attacking the body. Nice hard push kick. He landed up the middle against Jim Miller, and eventually landed that head kick for the finish. His stepping knee is very solid. Catches the opponent moving in. He'll also throw a left jab, which he steps into extremely well. His body appears to be an area of vulnerability. We know he got in that bike accident, which hurt him in the past. And we saw Anthony Pettis exploit it by going to the body and really busting him up and eventually finishing him as a result. He also had trouble with the aggressive volume of Nate Diaz, and Rafael dos Santos knocked him down with a big shot, with I think it was a big right hand that put him on the mat. It should be very interesting. I think this fight will be decided on the feet, but if we do go to the ground, Alvarez 7 wins by submission. He has been submitted twice. For Cerrone, he was 15-1 on the mat. Now, Chandler had the better wrestling compared to Alvarez, but I think Eddie should be the better wrestler against Donald Cerrone, and Dos Santos had some success, and Eddie might want to replicate that as well. But Cerrone's incredibly nasty on the mat. He can be controlled, but he's very dangerous, especially if he can get your back. Some time of this fight will be spent on the ground, but most should be on the feet is what I'm looking at. Cerrone's ability to endure dirty and exhausting fights is a question mark. Alvarez has been through some wars with Chandler, so I favor him if this fight does go deep. Cerrone's kicking game, though, his reach and distance management will limit the success of Alvarez's boxing, and I think it's going to test Eddie's chin. He seems to get hurt a lot and appears vulnerable right after, and that's what Cerrone preys on, I think, and that's when he looks for submissions, and I think we're going to see something similar to that happen. So my prediction is Donald Cerrone to defeat Eddie Alvarez by submission. In the main event of the evening, we're in the UFC's flyweight division. The champion, Demetrious Mighty Mouse Johnson, 22-1. Battles number 8th ranked Chris Kamikaze Cariaso with a record of 17 wins and 5 losses. Now, interesting to note, both these guys have actually faced off with the preliminary main eventers, Dominick, Cruz, and Takeya Mizugaki. Cruz beat Johnson which is his only loss since his WEC debut, while Cariaso won a very controversial decision over Takeya Mizugaki. Onto the matchup information now. DJ could be one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the world. Probably, absolutely is. He gave Dominick Cruz trouble at 135 pounds when he fought for the title. He has improved since that fight. He holds wins of the number 1, 2, 3, 5, and 7th ranked flyweights in the world, which is pretty darn impressive. For Cariaso, a lot of people questioning why he has a title shot. He does have 3 wins in a row coming into this, but all against non-top 15, guys that aren't ranked in the top 15. He lost to Jussier Formiga very convincingly. He was submitted by John Moraga. Physically, about the same height. 2-inch reach advantage for DJ, but both guys are used to being the smaller fighter, so it'll be nice for Demetrious Johnson to be slightly bigger. For Cariaso, that disparity is not that big a deal. Both guys are primarily striking based, but will supplement with a pretty strong grappling game, especially the champion. Cariaso throws a very kicking heavy striking attack, sometimes too heavy at times, and can become a little bit one-dimensional. Strikes landed per minute, 3.68 versus strikes absorbed per minute, 2.06. Not a ton of power. He does have 3 wins by knockout. Did stop Iliard Santos, which was his first knockout win since 2009. For Mighty Mouse, he will have the speed advantage in this matchup, which is almost always the case. I would anticipate against unless he's facing John Dodson. He has much more diversity and movement in his striking when compared to Cariaso. Just 4 wins by knockout, but he did stop Joseph Benavidez, which was his first knockout win since 2010, which was his final pre-WEC matchup. Strikes landed per minute 3.54 versus strikes absorbed 1.85, so he's very hard to hit, moves in and out, takes different angles, changes speeds. He's very unpredictable, but not wild by any stretch of the imagination. And in fact, he's incredibly technical, and Joe Rogan always positions him as one of the most technical fighters in the world. Now, Johnson will have a wrestling advantage, there's no doubt about that. He really mixes it up with his striking, which makes it incredibly effective. He lands just under 4 takedowns per fight at a completion rate of 53%. He's a Matt Hume-trained grappler, 7 submission wins overall, including defending his title against John Moraga with a late submission win. Cariaso was taken down and controlled by Formiga in their matchup. He was taken down 5 times in his win over Danny Martinez. He gets back up very, very well. But the big thing there is he's been taken down at least 1 time in each of his last 9 fights, and in 6 of those fights he's been taken down at least twice or more. He has a good guard. He will attack off his back. As I said, he can get back up, but certainly does not want to be on his back in this fight too frequently. He's 2-2 in fights ended by submission. For Johnson, he's very hard to control, very hard to get your hands on, very hard to take down. Ali Bogatinov, who's a very good wrestler in his own right, went 2 for 12 in takedown attempts. Dominick Cruz did land 10 takedowns, but he really struggled and had to work very hard to keep DJ on his back. I think Johnson's ability to go striking to wrestling and vice versa makes him one of the toughest guys in any division to fight. His pace in later rounds also is very difficult to deal with. That's how he beat John Dodson. He simply overwhelmed him late in that fight and took the fight away from him, even though Dodson had a lot of success early on. I think we'll see that be the case here. Cariaso is 12-2 in decisions. He's never gone 5 rounds, but he's very capable of fighting at least a full 3 and not having a big drop-off in performance. Johnson's 9-2 overall, with his losses against the aforementioned Dominick Cruz and Brad Pickett. Cariaso's a vet, but he lacks the speed and diversity to keep up, or the power to threaten Johnson and get his respect and back him off. I think Johnson, he could stop him, but my predictions here is Demetrious Johnson to retain his flyweight title and defeat Chris Cariaso by decision. Those are my 5 main card predictions for the upcoming UFC 178 bout. There are some fantastic preliminary breakdowns that I'll have available at KamikazeOverdrive.net. The bet packs will be available as well there. Please check out the panels. They've been doing a fantastic job breaking fights down as well. I've got a lot of stuff on the docket coming up, so as I said, hopefully I can do predictions for the next little few shows. If not, I obviously have bigger, more important things to be looking after. Hopefully the healthy and birth of my second child. Nonetheless, enjoy the fights as always, and I will see you back here at some point in the not too distant or possibly distant future. Take care, guys.